What if we could learn from outstanding leaders in business, sports, and education from some of the best voices in corporate America? Lighting the Path is a series of interviews with industry leaders whose stories highlight strategies that build purpose-driven cultures, engage and retain top talent, develop drivers that create high-performance teams, and connect people to the vision of your company. Join us to hear from game-changing, talented leaders whose paths make a difference at work and at home.
I wrote down the word not focus, but it's prioritization. I think the people that are working for us and the people you coach, Frankie, the leaders actually struggle, and do they come to you to kind of help them know what do they need to prioritize and how to help their people prioritize to be able to be as productive as they're capable of being?
That can be one of the things, yeah, because, and I'm thinking of a recent example, um, a leader who I was coaching was worried that they were being too reactive and that their teams didn't understand the intentionality that was inherent in their decisions because they weren't necessarily communicating how they were thinking about things.
Hmm.
On the outside, it looked like lots of direction changes. But for him on the inside, there was a common thread, and it was adapting to changing data around the situation.
Hmm.
And so that was leading to friction because he was getting the sense that that people weren't on board or that they were doubting his intuition or his capabilities. And so it was a matter of helping them zoom out, first of all, in our coaching,
Mm-hmm.
seeing, well, what was coming into play? What was he seeing that they didn't? And what might they be seeing that he's not? And then zooming out within our coaching session to then see, well, what could bridge the gap? What do they need to know? What do you need to do differently? What would support you? Is so
Mm-hmm.
um, that can definitely come in terms of if people aren't on board and they don't trust you. And something you said earlier, Mike, was really around, do we trust you?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's not quite what you said. And my working memory is not great, so I'm just like I just remember the word trust pinging in my brain,
No, it is, but
and that
yeah, if you think in terms of trust, what we're talking about, the example you just gave with your client um, is you helped your client get clarity, okay, on both big picture and his ability to be able to communicate that with his team. He then, in turn, went to his team and brought clarity to his team on both his decision-making process and creating a path that they can understand the why behind steps were being taken.
the
And
why
when you do those things, when you bring clarity and you support it with why, you increase trust.
totally, yeah, um, and that's also, as I said, like one of the things why why um, why I really wanted to reach out to you is because we think about the common thread, the why,
Hmm.
and that if people are just given directions without context, without purpose,
Hmm.
they don't bring them on for themselves. They don't take ownership. They don't
Hmm.
bring their own strengths and creativity to to those tasks and projects and activities and roles.
Yeah,
Um,
there's no buy-in that comes in, and of course we know with the work you and I do, without buy-in, you don't get commitment. You might get compliance, but you won't get commitment. You won't get the extra
yeah,
that a person could possibly bring either physically or mentally. And the reason why is that when a leader slows down and values that time of communicating with their people, the people feel a sense of they're being valued by the leader because of the time that's invested with them and helping them understand the importance of steps that need to be taken.
and they feel truly seen and heard.
Yes. Yeah, that's really, really important. And so, As I should have blocked 3 hours for this. I knew that was the case, but my shows never run that long. But they don't. But I knew, Frankie, that I was going to enjoy visiting with you on this. I wanted to kind of, as we kind of circle the wagon on this, we've been talking about the human side and the business side of interact, dealing with people, especially from a technical, people who are hard bet by their technical wizardness, their ability technically to really wrestle with really tough mental uh, problems that have to be resolved either in design or implementation. And what happens is that mental intellect only goes so far
Mhm.
without communication
Right.
and the ability to be able to express themselves to others, to be able to be spoken to in a way that you're marrying this human and this business side. One of the things that you said earlier that I think it's important as we wrap things around because it's a subject I spend a lot of time with. It's emotional intelligence, where the book came from, Equipped to Lead. It's EQ. And where have you seen, if you were going to coach somebody from an emotional intelligence standpoint, are there pitfalls that leaders fall into when they're trying to, we call it leadership functionality, um, where, in my definition of emotional intelligence is do I react or respond effectively? That's one of my
Mhm.
definitions. What are the pitfalls that leaders have to learn to strengthen their muscle that you guide them through?
Well, first of all, is self-awareness.
Mm,
What are you coming in with? Are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? These sorts of things. But how does that impact your executive functions? The prefrontal cortex cognitive processes that enable you to see clearly, to think, to think clearly, to be able to prioritize strategically, and also, form linear sentences that can then be conveyed. Um, Also managing and regulating your emotions and attention. So, first of all, it really is what's happening internally.
mm,
What are mitigating circumstances, but also what what are you coming in with in terms of stories or assumptions or frameworks, mental models that determine how you see the situation that other people might not see. There's also around communication specifically. What is your preferred mode of communication? And that includes receiving, making sense of, filing away in memory, and then communicating or conveying. And that can look like, so this is called processing modalities. A lot of people don't often take in information through purely auditory means. They want to have a set of bullet points or or something in terms of pre-meeting expectations, like here are the three questions I'm going to ask you, or taking notes or doodling. Actually, doodling is a form of getting into the sweet spot for concentration. It's
mm.
a way to concentrate. A lot of people who are neurodivergent have that extra activity to bump them into the focus zone. And then there's also visual communication. Some people, I mean, a picture paints 1,000 words. That's often the case for people who, regardless of neurodivergence, is how can you bringing emotion into it? We're we're not we're not computers. We love stories. We love to hear about user personas. We can put ourselves in other people's shoes with the right prompts. So,
Mm-hmm.
communication, not just in terms of facts and figures, but bringing the human element, relatable stories or examples, or customer quotes and things like that. And
Yeah.
then, of course, there's also, and you're hearing a little bit of this right now, is verbal processing. Sometimes when people are posed a question, they may think out loud. Maybe I'm not doing that right now because I've prepared for this, but they think out loud, so they might go in circles. So as a leader, understanding that maybe you need to give somebody the time to do that ahead of time by giving them a heads up of what might be in the meeting, or um, or to not get frustrated with
That's
that.
I think that's a really good point, uh, especially because when we finish with this, after we close out the show, I'd like to go grab my wife and have you talk to her because she has to live with that as I'm thinking as I'm talking to her, and she's going, "Where are you going?" Because I'm processing. Uh,
Verbally.
I'm talking. I'm verbally processing, and then after a while, it's like tumblers click in. You know, it's like after I process, now what she has learned to do with me is ask me questions. As
Mm.
I'm processing it, she goes, "So what's the point you're trying to make right now?" Or just something to kind of help me to to slow down. I did this is some self-awareness for those of you who are listening in. Is that I have a coach, a partner who gave me some great feedback, and she said, whenever you're moving from one point to another, if you aren't clear on what you're trying to do, you will talk while you're trying to get your brain to kick in, as opposed to not saying anything. Stop and just go look at your notes and collect your thoughts and start again because my that's how my brain is trying to process. Uh, and it's really interesting in that what you're talking about as leaders, we have to look at how do the people who work with us or part of our teams, how do they process information and then create an environment based upon their approach and create space, create guidance, create technique to help them to be able to either have more clarity on the instructions being given or on the steps that they need to be taken.
Yeah, and there is no one right way of doing things.
That's the important part, isn't it? Because you said something earlier, is as a leader, what happens, I want people to respond to things the way that I am, because that would make my life a lot easier if everybody thought like I did and looked at life through my lens. But I'm learning that that's not really the case, is it?
No, and neurodiversity is normal.
Mm-hmm.
Just
I
the
meant
way
to
that
ask.
the way that we think about things,
Yeah,
the
I
way
meant
that
to
our
ask you
brains.
this, yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
earlier, but because um, you've talked about neurodiversity, you talked about neurodivergent, and for those of us who aren't as learned as you are, help us understand what is the definition as we wrap this up that we've been
Hmm.
talking about neurodiversity and neurodivergent.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question, and some of it is semantics. Diversity just means the range of possible states,
Mm-hmm.
with the range of differences. So, um, just like in biodiversity, there's lots of different species, different colors, different shapes, like different
Mm-hmm.
plants, animals, etc. The same thing with how our brains are wired, how we operate. And neurodivergent is what implies that there's a norm, that there's a middle of the bell curve, that there's a set of social norms and expectations in terms of behavior and productivity and performance that is the ideal or normal. And divergence is defined as how far away from normal is something.
Yeah, whatever normal
So,
is, right?
yeah, so there's an implied, I mean, that looking at that from a systems perspective, who defines what is normal?
Mm-hmm.
It may look different in the global south than it does here in North America. It may look
Yeah.
different in Europe in terms of what are expectations around, how much emotions or you know come into the workplace, or what are social norms around punctuality or how people express themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So neurodivergence and yeah, neurodivergence is kind of a product of the system, that the lens that you're looking at it through.
Yeah. You know what I had not thought about this before, Frankie, is that and I'm going to spend some time pondering this because that's my word that I've been playing with the last couple of months. I like to ponder now.
Mm.
Normal should not mean comfortable. In other words, what in because as a leader, is this what is normal? Is normal only based upon comfort? I'm going to have to think about that because comfort isn't normal. You know, comfort is just because what happens is where high production comes from is whenever we become uncomfortable, when we stretch ourselves. And when we do that, we may have to look at what we perceive as normal. Somebody who comes in and asks lots of questions may not be normal behavior because it's uncomfortable. They're bringing up questions. Somebody might be direct.
Yeah.
And our culture calls us to not be direct in the South because we're in the South and that's uncomfortable. But I know, I was talking with a client this morning who was in New York and she's very direct. And we had a great conversation. But I had to watch out her directness that I didn't take offense to it because it wasn't personal. It was
Totally.
her way of
Yeah.
styling. And so I need to think about normal and comfort and where's the cross of that?
Well, may I add a couple of things?
Please.
So earlier you asked about, high performing leaders. What does that look like? And it's the ability to ask these philosophical questions and to ponder and to sit with the discomfort of maybe normal isn't what we should be aiming for. And then just another, maybe a caveat, but there's a sweet spot of comfortable, or there's times where comfortable is essential.
Mm-hmm.
That if we're thinking about the rhythms of growth and the different chapters of either a person or an organization's growth, that there are times where sitting on your laurels, resting on your laurels, or gathering resources for something coming up ahead, and rest and ease and comfort and normal is desirable. So hustle doesn't have to be the only way that we grow.
No,
Sometimes rest is how we grow too.
no, totally. I think that's a great way of wrapping things. As a matter of fact, I just made a decision that from my own wellness is that one day a month I give my wife an entire day, and tomorrow's her day. And so I've got things to do, things get done, but tomorrow's her day, for exactly what you're talking about. Because I know the reason why it's important is because I jump on a plane Friday and I had to speak in Vegas on a leadership thing on Sunday, fly back into another project on Tuesday, come back in and have three things to launch next week. And so I have to give, if I have to give myself permission to recognize that's as much of value as it is going and serving a client, because that's going to fill me up and that's going to
Mm,
help protect our very important relationship. And I think as leaders, we have a challenge with that. Uh,
so true.
Step
Yeah.
into it then. Frankie, I've had so much fun visiting with you. What's the best way if somebody wants to follow up with you, to reach out to you?
I'm on LinkedIn, LinkedIn/in/ Frankie Burkoben, and you can see probably the show notes to see how
That's
it's
right.
spelled.
Yep. Yeah, we'll put
And
that
that's the
in there
best
too.
way.
Okay. Well, so we'll make sure we have your LinkedIn thing, LinkedIn address in there for them to reach out to you. Again, I wish you great success as you continue to coach and to continue to read to your child. Uh,
An
so thank you.
absolute pleasure, Mike.
It's
Thank
been a
you
joy.
so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today on Lighting the Path, Strategies for Tomorrow's Leaders. If anything in this podcast speaks to you, if I've challenged you, or if you want to spend time digging into this subject a little deeper, or if you disagree with me, reach out. My contact information is on our website, lightingthepath.net, or email me at mike@mikelejeune.com. Also, look for me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect our networks. Keep lighting the path for those who choose to follow you. It's more than a responsibility, it's an honor.